Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
As John Lennon said, life's what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. How true this is. Many of the incidents that impact our lives are unplanned. Sometimes they're joyful and sometimes traumatic, but the lack of planning often requires considerable time and adjustment before life begins to flow in its new norm again. One of the things that can impact these occasions is communication with others. The ability to connect with people who are caught up in a situation at hand and to create, change, or adapt our styles of behaviour, verbal responses, and emotions is imperative. For example, imagine being in a car accident and unable to move yourself or anyone else in there with you. You're physically immobilised. Imagine now something happening in your life emotionally, something so huge for you that you're unable to speak, think clearly, or understand what might be happening to you or others. You're emotionally immobilised. With physical accidents, police, ambulances emerge on the scene to take care of you. You're taken to a hospital where hopefully doctors and surgeons repair your injuries to the best of their abilities. You then go on with the rehabilitation process to enable your physical body to reach the best it can be. In your emotional crisis, sometimes there is no one there to help you with your immediate needs. Sometimes the subject matter is not something you want to share. And sometimes the resources you need to begin your emotional journey are hard to find or not there at all. During this time, talking and communicating with others is paramount. However, if it needs to be special people and specialised help, knowing where to find what is right for you is really important, and sometimes it's like finding a needle in a haystack. There are many challenges for finding the right ways to change your communication with those you love. The challenges of true acceptance of the new person that you or they are can involve alteration in communication styles. Finding the right people to discuss these problems and find new solutions with is vital. I'm Kate Mason and welcome to Parenting and Personalities. This is the podcast that connects you to the ones you care about the most. Today I'm talking to Cindy and Brian about their family's journey with their son's depression. They've lived in fear of losing not only their only child, but with the huge life-altering experience that this has had on all three of them as they face this emotional crisis together. Through much searching, many disappointments and heartbreak, they discovered several processes that helped them all understand not only their son's depression, but how to get the best out of their own personal family dynamic in the process of their son's recovery that helped them find their way back to their new norm. Cindy and Brian are here today to tell their story and share their experiences and to offer support to others who might find themselves in a similar space. Hi Cindy and Brian, thanks for joining me today. Now, could you please tell me your story? Where did it all begin?
Well, we were a little older to the parenting game. We didn't get married until we were in our mid-30s, and our first and only precious child came along about 5 years later. So, we thought we're pretty well educated. We're into our careers. We're mature. We should be able to handle this. It should be no problem at all. And then became fairly obvious around the age of 7 that this was a pretty sensitive kid. And of course, both of us had been pretty sensitive kids, and we grew up in a world where you had to learn how to toughen up because, you don't prepare the road for the kid, you prepare the kid for the road. So we did all kinds of things trying to accomplish that. And it just resulted in more anxiety, more worry, more difficulty for him. And by the time he was in junior high, even though he'd been seeing a psychologist for anxiety, he then became just persistently suicidal. And like psychologists sort of said to us, well, I can't do anything with him when he's like this.
Oh, what was that like for you when you think you're in the hands of an expert and he says something like that?
Well, it was puzzling to me because if you don't know what to do, how do we know what to do?
Exactly.
I have been a nurse for 30 plus years, but never in addiction and mental health. But I did have a lot of contacts in the health system. And, it was remarkably tough trying to find some resources. They said, well, if it's really bad, you can go to emergency. I think you call it A&E.
No, we call it emergency. Yeah. Yep.
Do you?
Yep.
Okay. And having worked in emergency, I know that we sit them in the waiting room for hours. Mm-hmm. And then after a while we say, are you still feeling like you're going to hurt yourself? And they're so tired, they say no. And we say, okay, you can go home now. And I thought, I'm not up for that. I'm barely coping with, some sleep, much less sitting in a hard chair for hours all night and then being sent home to cope with something that I wasn't managing before that. So, it was disappointing. I feel for the psychologist. I think she didn't want to believe that she would be contributing in any way to any adverse outcome. And she also felt that her therapeutic value wasn't best
practice for him.
Yes, wasn't best practice when he was so distressed that he couldn't really learn any skills. So that was disappointing. And we did see a psychiatrist whom our son did not like in the least, which made it really difficult to manage. And we tried some rounds of medication, which has sort of made him really sort of wooden and no less suicidal, but just very unable to participate in school and in the things that were that made his life worth living. And I was getting really frustrated with the psychiatrist. I said, come on, this is not acceptable that we have a kid who's so at risk all the time. Isn't there something we can do? And he said, well, you can't expect medication to take care of everything. He's just going to have to learn how to live with those feelings.
Wow, how stressful for you guys.
It was awful. We were just panicked.
Yeah, it was an awful feeling. You feel helpless, and you feel like you're doing everything you can, and yet you're not doing enough.
Well, and it was tricky to know what to do because we got advice like lock up all of the sharp things in your house. Well, that's impossible.
Yes.
And what our son will tell you now is, if you're serious about killing yourself, anything can be a weapon, which is no solace whatsoever because now what do you do? So we would kind of take turns doing the suicide watch, we called it. And so one or the other of us would try to be with him most of the day and try to dig him out of his room because he was really isolating, which was very worrisome. Like, what's he doing in there? And try to engage him in something to distract him a little bit and see if we could manage while we figured out what else to do. But, I slept at the foot of his bed or by the door of his room, hoping that if he was up in the night or so distressed that he was making a bad decision or a permanent decision, that I might be awakened to the danger and hopefully have some idea what to do. So eventually, after calling all over Canada and to many centers in the U.S., we found a residential treatment center that specialized in dialectical behavior therapy, DBT, which was what was the recommended treatment for our son. And so we picked up in 4 days, us and the dog.
All of us.
Can't leave him behind. Or she.
We
No.
didn't know how long we were going to be gone for, I think, was the challenge. So in 4 days, we had a decision presented to us, which is we have an opening now. And so if you can get here now, you can probably take advantage of that. If you choose to wait, the opening could be gone. So we scrambled.
Yeah, because it's literally life and death to a degree too, isn't it?
It is exactly that. And so there's no choice. You do what you have to do.
And how far away was this place for you?
Well, from us to Boston, that's a long way.
Right.
That's
right. So it was
for us to fly to Toronto and then catch another plane to Boston from Toronto. We're flying right across the country, and then
a little bit south,
and then heading south.
So about 6 hours of plane time.
6 hours to Toronto. Another.
So just a quick question. In the meantime, what happened to your jobs? Like what were you doing? Did you have to put a hold on all of that?
It's funny. I didn't even think about that.
Well, you were retired.
I was retired.
That was easier.
Okay.
And
right.
I've worked for the same health system. It's changed names many times for such a long time. And I said to them, I have to go. I'd like a leave. If you feel like you can give me a leave, that would be great. If you can't, I understand. I have to go.
Right.
And so fortunately, about half the time we were away, I was actually paid, which really helped because we lived in a furnished apartment that
short stay.
Was a commercial business rental kind of thing, not too far from the hospital that accepted dogs, of course, and had
thank goodness.
And had a dog park. So we were there for 7 weeks, and our son was in residential treatment. And, he was fortunately really tired and of being sick, and he was out of ideas as well. And so I think Brian had mentioned when we did the pre-interview. Do you want to talk about when we had the entrance interview at McLean?
Oh, that was a sort of a scary, unexpected moment. We weren't quite sure what to expect. We rolled in there literally with our luggage and our son, and we were met by someone who said, "Just wait here. We would like to talk to your son, and you should know that if he's not prepared to stay or to work with us, then you'll have to go home."
Wow.
And, there was a team of 13 professionals in the room waiting to talk to him. As Cindy said, fortunately, Ryan was very motivated. He didn't want to feel that way. And he saw a solution, or at least a potential solution, an interest, if you will, that sort of, I probably exceeded all of our expectations in terms of the level of medical support waiting there. And fortunately, that interview, which we weren't allowed to be part of, just so you know, they said, "Yeah, no, it's fine. Leave his suitcase here."
Oh, I bet you were relieved.
We were. And interestingly, he really wasn't talking to us by this time. He was so upset. He was really blaming us for a lot of things. We were blaming ourselves for a lot of things. And we were just frantic. Our whole focus was on just keeping him alive. And so we weren't making really good attempts at connecting or communicating because we just felt out of our depths completely. So as he got into this intensive treatment, which turned out to be fantastic for him, and, he took to it like a duck to water, and he's in fact studying psychology now. And it was quite funny. Last week he called me because he was formulating a case for a clinical course that he's taking, and it was based on dialectical behavior therapy. And I thought, well, that's good.
Wow.
You really know that.
You know a lot.
That's right. Yep, got that one covered.
So part of the treatment we found out was that we needed to go to class. every Monday morning for 2 hours.
Well, it was offered to us. We thought we've got to know what to do because, one of the things that we've seen with certainly taking a child to a doctor, a psychologist or a psychiatrist, or even to the hospital or other sources of help, is that when it's done, they hand you your child back, and so they've done their hour, and now here you go, and you're no more equipped. And I think that's also a struggle with kids because they think, well, I'm doing something, you're not doing anything, and
really, training the parent.
Yes.
Yeah.
And man, what an eye opener this was for us. As I said, we think we're pretty smart, well-educated people. We had some decent means. We, not a lot of super stressors in our lives, but we were absolutely ill-equipped to be able to care for this young person because his temperament required a special kind of care that we had no experience with in our own families and didn't really know how to approach.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say we probably both grew up in the it's my way or the highway kind of a upbringing.
I did too.
And it worked for a lot of kids. It doesn't work for some kids, including ours.
Yeah. So it was quite fascinating, actually, to sit with other parents also who were all struggling similarly, which made us think that, we weren't the only terrible parents.
and that's the worst part too, is actually you're not terrible parents in that sense, but you feel terrible, don't you?
You certainly feel helpless.
You're thinking,
and it's beyond helpless. It's there's terror. There's true terror. I mean, you can't keep your eyes open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't. And even if you could,
no, that's not a life.
And it's exhausting. And the thing is that I think we come into parenting thinking, well, we can do this. Like you say, we don't have the expectations. We don't actually get taught anything either. And when you get to situations like this, nobody's shown you any rules or what to do. So when you talk to other parents and you say it made you feel good, were they in the same boat as you, feeling wise and the experiences that it had? There's
sort of a range. There were parents there who had multiple children, of which all but one, if you will, was responding to standard parenting in a standard way. And then suddenly they were faced with someone who just didn't respond the same way. So, I think the common thread was the people that were there generally were terrified and looking for help and had looked everywhere they could. There was people from all over the world there. And, it was striking to us that, first of all, we're not alone. You do feel alone. You think, no, who else is going through this? No one's going through this.
Well, sorry.
When
we talk to our family, we talk to our friends, and they're like, you just need to put your foot down. Like, just be a little stricter. Everything will be fine. Like, you're not going to let him get away with that, are you? He's just doing it to get attention.
Yep.
Well, he was, but not for the reason they thought.
No. And that kind of treatment was not going to get you anywhere either.
Well,
they were talking
it would have gotten us somewhere that we would have not wanted to be.
I was working with a parent who was worried about their kid because they didn't focus in class on the details and they were worried they were going to get low grades. And then this child was given a project, which was something he could run with, and his attitudes and grades went through the roof. He was in his element. Do you and your child need to find their point of difference so they can fly? Let me help you unravel some of the enigmas of their personality and enjoy parenting a kid that you actually understand. After all, parenting's supposed to be fun. Let's chat. The personality coach
I'm grateful for Brian. I have to tell this story. There was one night when we had police and ambulances at our house, and I was absolutely mortified. We didn't know what was happening. We hadn't called them. Brian had been talking to a friend who felt he was at risk and called on his behalf. And so we were completely unaware of what was going on. Of course, they come in, they separate us, and we go through the whole business. And then as soon as they find out that he has a psychologist and a psychiatrist, it's like, unless he's in danger of ending his life this moment, we're going to leave you here. Nonetheless, all our neighbors are peeking out the window in this little cul-de-sac where we had lived for, 18 years. And so I thought, oh my God, how am I going to face these people again? And in the morning, Brian went out walking with the dog, and he knocked on their doors and he said, you're probably worried about us because the police and the ambulance were at our house last night. And I just want to let you know we're okay. It's all right. Ryan hasn't been feeling well, but, we've got a plan and we're going to get it sorted. And so just want to let you know we're okay. And I thought, you were brilliant. You were brilliant.
What fantastic communication, though, too, rather than have people sitting there talking about you behind your back.
They're going to be talking. I mean, there was no getting around what was happening in front of the house. So.
No. So facing it head on is sometimes the best way to go in that respect. That's a great story. So when you got to the centre and you spent your 7 weeks there and you had your parenting classes each day, what was it that you were learning?
Well, it was each week, and we were learning,
each week.
We were learning really we learned to see our son in a different way. So there's about 60% of mental illness arises between the ages of 12 and 25. And most of those have difficulties with emotion regulation. And it causes lots of problems for them as well as for their their parents as well. And a feature of that for a smaller group is extraordinary sensitivity. And so this high sensitivity and high reactivity results in these overwhelming emotions, like everything that we would experience as highs and lows, sort of magnified by 100 for him.
Right.
And so his brain, not being very, highly developed at the age of 16, was really struggling. I mean, these overwhelming feelings, and his behaviors were really an attempt to try to stop the pain, to run away from it, to avoid it. And so what was fascinating to me was things that seemed to be a problem to me were actually a solution for him, because they created some relief for him, at least temporarily. And because he didn't have any other tools, that was his go-to. I mean, sad to think that you've completely run out of ideas and the only way to continue to exist with this painful life is to end your life. And so that was jaw-dropping, that this was how his mind was working. And to think that we had anything to offer that was going to be useful in that regard. And so, we learned about, how our emotions really affected him and the risk factors for emotion dysregulation. When people are not eating well or sleeping well, not getting regular exercise, or are already angry or unhappy with each other. I mean, that gets transmitted through the air, and we all know it because we experience it with others when we're at work. But for these kids, it's just like the world is pressing on them. And I mean, Ryan used to say to me, well, I can't take transit to school, And I said, why? Well, all the people there, they're so sad, and they have all these feelings going on, and those feelings just press on me. Wow. I can't tell which ones are theirs and which ones are mine. By the time I get to school, I'm completely exhausted. I thought,
Wow, I know.
I had no idea. So slowly we learned to, make sure we weren't engaging with him unless we were in a good, settled space, and to acknowledge him. We see you. When he walks into the room, we shut off the TV, the stove, whatever we're doing, and we focus just on him. We're interested in your experience. Doesn't matter if we agree with it. Doesn't matter if we like it necessarily. But we're interested in you, and you can tell us anything. And that has been our suicide prevention strategy, essentially. I say to parents now, usually you don't want to be invited to the burning building, but in this case, you absolutely do, because we know our kid the best. And we have a fighting chance of being able to help soothe him so he can move out of this intensely emotional state. And he doesn't ask unless he needs help. He has tried everything he can. So we give him our attention whenever he asks for it. And honestly, people say to us, you're just pandering to him. You have to drop everything in your life just to pay attention to him. And, if you give him a little bit of attention just to let him know that you're there, you're interested, it doesn't take long. 10 minutes, he's off again. But knowing that we're there in the background, that we are interested in what's going on, and that's really kept us going.
It can be an intense 10 minutes because as your parents, your child tends to open up, and I'll use that in broad terms, but they tend to feel safe being the most volatile, frankly, with you. And so sometimes it can be very unpleasant and it's very difficult. And so you have to really, really control your own emotions in terms of, listen, be curious, and don't react too extremely.
So out of this whole thing, what advice, well, we don't talk about advice, do we? So we're not going to advise people, but what suggestions do you have? Because it's an amazing journey, I hate to use that word, but it's an amazing journey that you have all made as a family to get to the point that you're at now. And you have been through some horrific, devastating times. And there are a lot of people who are in this situation, and they are sitting there going, I do not know what to do, because so many people must hit the wall that you hit. So what would you be able to tell people moving forward, what you did, where you went, what was the best thing for you out of all of the treatments and everything that you did?
Well, I honestly, the family skills training is not a substitute for therapy. Mm-hmm. But it made a tremendous difference to our family. It was really transformational for us. In terms of us coming to terms with some of the ways that we had been responding and understanding how, while they make sense for many, many kids, that they didn't make sense for ours, and that we could adjust without feeling like we were pandering to him or babying him. And one of the other things I didn't talk about that we did learn was also that, you need to be able to say what you think, and you need to be able to have limits and to, create some discipline. But it's very gentle. Situations happen that are not ideal, for sure. And we can agree now that this is not something any of us wanted. But treating each other badly is not improving the situation.
No.
And so, if you want to pick someone to blame, usually we could all be to blame in some way. We were all part of something we did or didn't do that may have contributed to the situation. So I would say for me, running around to doctors and therapists, I needed to do for Ryan. But none of that was helping me. I was kept to the outside. Once kids are 16, Unless they give explicit consent for you to be in the sessions, you're not permitted to be. And I think it's very tough because therapists are trying to create a relationship with your child, and they set on goals that are relevant to the child. But if you're not in on it, how can you be supportive and in fact not get in the way?
Yeah. So what was the most important thing for you, Brian? Did you think the same thing?
Well, I do. I mean, I realized that I was the king of invalidation,
Yep. I'm with you.
the way I was responding, suck it up, I mean, I had, we both had great, in relative terms, great family situations that we came from, and middle class, good education. So you think that what's what and what should be done and so forth, and but that what was obviously before any training at all was it wasn't working, and so I think that one thing that struck me immediately when I started to attend the sessions was we weren't alone, and I'll say this: I'm shocked on a daily basis as to how not alone we are.
Yes.
This is a very big issue. And so, I would say just knowing that we weren't alone, it took the heat down, if you will, a little bit. And then, because you're punishing yourself. There's no doubt about it. You keep thinking, what have I done wrong? What could I do better? And it just doesn't seem like there's any answers. And as and it's a slow process, and it takes time and practice. And, I'll be honest, for a long time, my big goal was not to make it worse. Try not to engage in a way to make it worse. And Cindy's far more skillful than I am. And having said that, at least initially, that was okay. That was a step. And so I think that was another lesson. But I do think ultimately trying to maintain that relationship at all costs. I just can't agree with it's my way or the highway, and you're going to live in my house, it's under these rules. If you do that, if you go there, there's no turning back. It's very difficult to go back on that, and your child could end up looking to other people for guidance, and it may not be good. And so if you think you've got problems now, if you ruin that relationship, you got bigger problems.
Yeah. So really, you have to make some pretty big changes yourself. And you know what? We can all learn. That's the thing. And if people give us the right information and for us to use to build those relationships, that's really, really important. And I think, thank you for sharing, because I think what you've got to say is so important for people. So how can they get in contact with, the organisation? I know that Doug will put all the notes in the show notes, but how is there anywhere that everywhere from the world can reach? Is there an organisation that, say we're in Australia, that someone in Australia could get in contact with to find out how to do the parenting, look at the parenting program?
Well, I think the National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder has a free class called Family Connections that is available in Australia. But, and I was actually teaching that program here in Canada, and then we were teaching in person, and when the pandemic came along and sort of turned everything upside down, went to an online only sort of situation, which was coordinated out of Eastern Canada and not really that available to people in our province. So I've spent the last year or so working with some other really talented parents with lived experience who also have professional qualifications, developing a program called Lifeboat Family Skills. So we're just about to start teaching online later on in April. Currently, we're working with Kickstand, which is the Integrated Youth Hub in Alberta, on their online platform. But as we get going, our intention is to make this available to people anywhere who want to take part in the classes. And unlike some other parenting classes that we've been involved in, you don't have to sign up for 12 weeks. The workshops are 2 hours at a time, and they're in 3 levels. So there's 4 in the first level. You don't have to take them in any order. You can take them multiple times if there's one that you find that you are particularly interested in or trying to figure out. But you have to take all 4 before you can take the next level. There's 3 in that level. And similarly, you need to take all 3 of those before taking the more advanced level. But the idea is to really engage parents from where they're at. I mean, the titles of our modules are things like, I thought I taught you better than that, to sort of reflect what parents are thinking and to really validate that it makes sense you're thinking that. And here's why it's not perhaps helping you in this situation with your loved one. And here are some different ways to reframe the situation, to rethink the situation, to help you to be more effective with your loved one, feel better about yourself. Because gosh, when parents feel not very capable, it's just a devastating feeling. You know, the mental health struggles are not great, for sure. And the treatment options are really frustrating. And as an underlay to all of that, the idea that our family has become more skillful, more connected, our relationships have become better, gives us a lot of hope that we'll be able to weather whatever comes our way together. And that, as you know, we'd say to Ryan, keep reaching for what you want, and we'll help you as much as we can. But it's your life. You have to decide what's going to be the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. And let's help you reach for it.
Wow, what a wonderful way to finish this story. Thank you so much for sharing, because I think that sends a shiver down my back, because I think there are so many people that need to hear that and need to know that. So I really appreciate both of you for sharing that with me this morning. And I hope that anyone that is listening right now checks out the show details. And the end of April, would your program be surfacing, or is that only for Canada as such? When would you think it would be international?
I think that'll only be for Canada, just to start with. The Kickstand, as our partners, have graciously funded the development.
Right. That's wonderful. So it really is a lifeline for parents, and we are often felt so judged, so alone. And it sounds like there's something that can give someone hope. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Lovely to talk with you, Kate.
Sometimes simply chatting over a coffee is not always the answer. There are certain processes that create good listeners and knowledge around advice giving versus coaching each other, and the appropriate empathy. As a person seeking help with a problem, sharing it with someone else is important in many ways. Validation. When you talk to someone who's going through a similar problem, you feel validated. You realise you're not alone in your struggles, and it can be a great comfort. Empathy. The person you're talking to may be able to empathise with your situation in ways that others may not. They may have had similar experiences and can offer insights into what worked for them. Support. Talking with someone who's going through a similar problem can provide you with much needed support. They might be able to offer you practical, emotional encouragement and advice. Now, learning to listen to someone else's thoughts, problems and emotions is also really important in the problem-solving process. It takes 2 to hold a conversation, and a one-sided conversation is not satisfactory on many fronts. So learn how to be an empathetic listener as well. It can make you feel less alone and give you a sense of community talking to someone else who has the same problematic situations you have. And it can be crucial when dealing with difficult challenges. I'm Kate Mason. Thank you for listening to Parenting and Personalities. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you leave a rating and a review that would help others learn about this podcast. If you're interested in discovering more about you and your family's personality types, you'll find my book, Who is This Monster or Treasure in My House, on Booktopia or Amazon. If you have an episode idea, please send a note to thepersonalitycoach@gmail.com. Many thanks to our producers at Stories and Strategies, and we'll see you next time.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.